There's a piece of furniture next to with my usual whatever.
Good afternoon. I hope everyone had a good lunch, and particularly that those who are here do not remain ignorant of the presence of a particular lemon meringue pie that a person whom I won't identify by name, although she just walked in the room, made for everyone's enjoyment. I urge you, if you have not yet done so, to at least have a small piece. This is the reason why we actually all come here. Buddhism is all very well, but it's basically it's Phyllis's desserts that kind of We talk about compassion, but when someone who does not eat dessert, does not eat sweets, makes sweets for others with real excellence, I wouldn't do that. I'm not that nice. So, well, the principal matter now having been disposed of, we can extend ourselves to minor issues like how to achieve an awakening. The second of the four prayers, which Kathy, can you give us a page number in the book that people are looking at? One that begins Imaho Primordially Unaltered.
8.
Page 8.
She's looking at the.
Yes. Yeah, because that's what is on the website. It's available for download. So. We saw that this morning's prayer, which goes with the outer sadhana and with the external mandala from the combined sadhana, is biographical in its references, and also concerned with the devotion to the Guru, because the Guru, by prayer to the Guru, obstacles can be removed. That brings up something that I should have mentioned but didn't think of, that came up during lunch, and it's something that Barway Dorje used to regularly stress. Many of you will remember that whenever Rinpoche gave the vow of refuge, he would define Buddha as free of 4 types of fear. And the 2 aspects of that most directly benefited others were freedom from fear of proclaiming the nature of the path as well as the nature of the obstacles encountered on the path. And I used to think, what an odd specification of all the things that the Buddha could have been, because the Buddha was not afraid of anything. So why specify that? And after about listening to this and translating this for about 15 years, it finally got through my head that the reason why this is stressed traditionally and why Rinpoche chose to always mention it is that the obstacles are the terrain of the path. In other words, if you want to get from here to New York City, the obstacle is the miles you have to cross. So we don't have to think of obstacle as an obstacle. It's what we have to deal with. You know, we don't normally refer to, well, we all have at one time or another, referred to the highways of New York State as obstacles, with the possible exception of the Long Island Expressway, which the father of one of you once referred to as the world's largest parking lot. You know who that was, right? Yeah. It's Tom's dad. But highways are not intended to be obstacles. They're ways of overcoming the terrain, but they're the distance that must be traveled. So in other words, the Buddha was not afraid of telling people how far they had to go and how to go there. So when we think of the Guru as the remover of obstacles, and Guru Rinpoche specifically is often prayed to in that regard. Guru Rinpoche Tara, among deities, usually if somebody will go to a great Lama and say, who should I pray to? They'll either say Guru Rinpoche Tara. Yeah. The message is that the obstacle is the terrain. We can frame it as an obstacle or we can frame it as a process. So obstacles, rather than being inherently obstacles, are really what we could call the terrain, the process, the substance that we travel over on the path itself. In contrast to that outer supplication or prayer, the inner one, which we turn to this afternoon, is concerned with praying to the Guru as inseparable from the Yidam. Now, from our point of view, Guru Rinpoche, it seems so distant at times that he is more of a Yidam than a Guru. We imagine ourselves to be Guru Rinpoche, we imagine our teachers to be Guru Rinpoche, and so on. We haven't met him. But nevertheless, he is an historical person, like the Buddha. The question arises, because we have so many deities that we pray to. We have gurus, our root guru, and a whole lineage, multiple lineages going back to the Buddha, including Guru Rinpoche and others. And we have all of these deities, like Chenrezig, Tara, Vajrayogini, Kila, Yamantaka, and endless others. And we have Dharma protectors. And particularly for those of us who grew up in cultures that are, to the extent that they embrace any spirituality whatsoever, it's monotheistic. And so it's very confusing. And it's all the more confusing when you're told, and there are all inclusive. Well, if each and every one of them is all inclusive, why do we have so many different ones? The simple answer to that question, and I think we should stick to simple, practical answers, because scholarly, historiological answers aren't going to help us in our practice for the most part. The simple answer to that question is because we have different tastes, predilections. Some people really prefer red to blue. Some people really prefer orange to green. People have favorite colors. Some people have better feelings about females than they do about males, or vice versa. Some people, when they're frightened, want to pray to a deity who looks tough and has fangs, who looks like she or he could really kick ass. Some people really would like to pray to a deity who embodies the tranquility and simplicity of awakening. And it's simply going to be more effective if you meditate on what you want to meditate on. It's really simple. I mean, we can dress it up. all we want to. Like, for they say, well, wrathful deities, so to speak, exist in order to embrace those hard to tame. And in legend, of course, they attract fairly demonic beings who are attracted to them because they think they're like them, and then they're gradually converted to the path and so on. But in our lives, what it fundamentally refers to is us. What touches you? Teaching at a place near here, Rinpoche, and I won't give him all his titles because, well, on this side of the river, he's His Holiness, and on the other side of the river, he's His Eminence. So I'll say His Holiness, since we're on the east side of the Hudson. His Holiness, Rinpoche, teaching near here, said that Buddha nature, while, as the Buddha himself said, is impossible to completely realize until you're a Buddha, even a 10th level Bodhisattva doesn't, on a very simple level, in terms of getting a glimpse of it, is not only easy to explain, it's something that everybody's experienced. And he says, you have a word for it in English. It's being touched. I was touched by their gesture. This is touching. Unless you're being sarcastic. You know, how touching. You know, that's not Buddha nature. That's maybe Noel Coward, but probably just pointless sarcasm. But you know, when we say I was touched, because when we say you're touched, it means something broke through. You felt it, at least metaphorically, in your heart. It wasn't an object of ideas. It was an object of intense, however brief, but intense emotional feeling. So there are different deities because different people are touched by different things. And as the 17th Jomon Karmapa, who was, of course, His Holiness on both sides of the Hudson, so we can just say His Holiness without. I say controversy. Does anyone actually say controversy in this country? Now, Naomi, you and I both grew up in sort of not England, not America. Did you grow up with controversy or controversy? Okay, all right. I thought I'm probably just losing my mind.
What a controversial subject.
It is. His Holiness said, you know, in any devotional practice, if you're not touched, it's not working. And that doesn't mean that we don't need discipline. We do need discipline. We can't expect to be feeling with great intensity every minute of the long hours of practice. But basically, we should not be doing something that does not touch us, that does not touch our heart, especially in the deity or Guru Yoga, deity practice or Guru Yoga. So, therefore, since all of these deities are all inclusive, you only need one. The deity, is always said, is inseparable from your guru, so it does not need to be meditated upon separate. You can meditate on the guru and realize that includes the deity, or on the deity, provided that you realize, that includes the guru. But we still find ourselves in communities practicing many different deities, because since we get together, there are going to be a few. There's a few of us, and we're all touched by different things. I mean, you know, there are people for whom the sun rises and sets with Kila, or Yamantaka, or Tara, or Chenrezig. And those people should not be forced not to do those things. But they also like to practice with other people, which means that some of us who might be touched by one of the others of those will be joining them on their Kila sunrise and sunset, or the Yamantaka sunrise and sunset, and so on. So practically speaking, even though we may have one deity at home, in community we have many. So how do we put all that together? And that is what one of the things that's addressed in this second prayer. So the prayer really addresses and gives us systematic and pithy explanation of how to fit the deities together and how to fit the guru and deity together. We start, as we did with the previous prayer, with Guru Rinpoche's Trikaya. But in this case, because this is not so much about him as a particular person, it's not Amitabha, Genrezi, and Padmakara. It's Samantabhadra, Vajrasattva, and Padmakara. Now, from the highest point of view, Samantabhadra and Amitabha are the same thing. And in fact, there is a form of Samantabhadra that is made to look like Amitabha, and there are forms of Amitabha that are made to look like Samantabhadra. The distinction here is that in the when you talk about the Trikaya of all of these deities, it's going to start with Samantabhadra as the primordial dharmakaya, and then Vajrasattva, and then the guru or deity specified. So the first line says emaho, which is an expression of wonderment or amazement, positive amazement, not negative amazement. Primordially unaltered dharmakaya Samantabhadra. Unaltered here means more than unaltered, it means uncreated. Samantabhadra, the dharmakaya, always was and always will be. It's not a creator God, it, he, them, because sometimes it can be male and female, and it's not that like that. It's what we are, actually, and always have been. So it's unaltered because it can't be changed. You know, as it says about Buddha nature in the sutras, I forget the quote, but anyway, it says, you know, can't be changed, it's not going to change, doesn't need to be changed, which is a good thing because you couldn't change it even if it did. Sambhogakaya web away sound.
The away sound.
Oh. All right, well, we have to go on anyway. The web of magical illusion means the idea of it appearance without existence, non-existent appearance, or menon. And that sounds like a contradiction, but in fact it isn't. As Buddhist logicians are preeminently demonstrate, and I won't go through that because that's not our subject here, if something existed, it couldn't appear. The nature of appearance necessitates non-existence. It's only because things don't exist that they can appear. And I'm not going to go through that. If you want to understand that, the easiest way to see that explained would be Lord Tsongkhapa's three principal aspects of the path with it, but you'll need a commentary. We use the commentary by Jungo Control Grade or any other, but that is the most the briefest, let's say. Now, I wouldn't say the easiest, but the briefest explanation of that. And it's called a web because there's an idea in the, starting with the Mahayana Avatamsaka Sutra, which of course is so influential in Mahayana Buddhism that in fact there's a school of Chinese Buddhism just called the Avatamsaka or Huayan school, where the principal observance is reciting that sutra, which is multi-volume, as a group so that you get through it every year. And there'll be weekly meetings of the community where they'll go through a little bit of the sutra. But one of the, and the Huayan, the Avatamsaka Sutra is very important to Tibetan Buddhism as well. The aspiration of the conduct of excellence, the stories in Mipam's book on the 8 Bodhisattvas, a lot of this comes from the Avatamsaka. And the Avatamsaka presents a notion of reality that is very important to Japanese, Chinese, and Tibetan Buddhism. Although it's often less explored in Tibetan Buddhism because nobody can talk about everything all the time. And it's an idea of a kind of, I hate to use words that sound like I'm just going into a sort of a New Age vagueness, but it's the presentation of reality as holographic, in the sense that the web in the sutras originally it's called the web of Brahma, and sometimes the web of Indra it's like a net, and at each corner on the net is a jewel, and each jewel contains the whole thing. So it's a little bit like, to use an obvious simile, it's a little bit like the World Wide Web, where, you know, I'm here and you're there, but I can see the information that you produce and so on. So it goes much further than that. So the idea in Mahayoga of the web of magical illusion, because in this prayer we're principally talking about Mahayoga, the Mahayoga view, which I know at least one of you understands because he actually read the book that I recommended about Mahayoga. Yeah. You know, people ask me, what can I read to understand the background for this? And for 20 people that ask, maybe one person will actually follow up and do it. But hey, that's you should still ask. The book is Establishing Appearances Divine by Rongzong Pandit. And if you want to understand the Nyingma view, which is our view here of the generation stage, I highly recommend it. Translated, I believe, by Heidi Koppel. The Mahayoga notion is that not just impure reality, but in fact pure reality is manifestly, spontaneously present and is, in a sense, holographic, or something like, let's say, like holographic in nature. And so the web of magical illusion is not just the magical illusion of ordinary appearances, but the magical illusion of pure appearances, the appearances of the bodies and realms of the peaceful and realmful deities. So the first stanza, and I'm not going to go through it word by word, but I'm going to go through what's hard to understand, refers to that. Now, what's going to happen after that is each guru mentioned, because this is primarily concerned with Guru Rinpoche and 9 of his teachers. 8 of his teachers and a 9th, because they're put in a separate group, correspond to specific deities. In some case, well, we'll go through them case by case. So the first is the central figure of the mandala, which again is a form of Guru Rinpoche, and this is called Lakeborn Vajra, or Tsuti Dorje. If you look at the refuge assembly tanka, you'll see it's again a form that looks somewhat like Vajradhara. In different termas, Lakeborn Vajra can appear differently. Sometimes he's white, sometimes he's blue, sometimes he's pink. Here he's in the Tanka, at any rate, he's blue and holds a Vajra and a bell and is embracing his consort Mandala. So he's somewhat like the Uddiyana Vajradhara figure we saw this morning. Sometimes he's not quite like that. He has a Vajra and a skull cup and life vase, but still some Mugakaya ornaments, and he's blue. And then in some termas, he's pink. In any case, that is the inner form of Guru Rinpoche and the principle of the inner mandala. And unstained by birth, you were miraculously born on a lotus, Lord of all mandalas, highest Heruka. Well, first of all, Heruka. This Heruka is a Sanskrit epithet or word describing someone. And it's translated into both Tibetan and Chinese to mean drinker of blood, blood drinker. Some Sanskritists say that actually it originally means he who shouts hey. Hey is the explanation, hey. And Ru can mean shouter. Like, for example, Rudra, which gets translated in Tibetan as violent, Drogpo. Rudra originally meant the wailer because it was a storm god who eventually in the Vedas gets turned. Anyway, if you watched His Holiness Karmappa's teachings about the derivation of Tantra in India, he went through that whole evolution of Rudra to Shiva and so on. So Heruka, ka means person who does, or person. So Heruka could be understood to mean the one who shouts hey. But it's translated as Troktum, or blood drinker. And the reason is because hey is understood to mean an exclamation of joy. And Ru, as we'll see a little bit on, to be a reference to Rakta, or blood. Rakta can mean anything red. It's related to the word raga and so on. But Rakta principally in Buddhist usage is blood. So it would be the person who delights in blood. Whether it translated, however you translate it, Heruka is used of a wrathful or semi-wrathful deity. And they're usually depicted with either they or their consort is holding a skull cup filled with blood. What it refers to is that the idea that if ignorance is eradicated, when a mind is not ignorant, the emotions, the passions, so to speak, what we think of as blood, like we say hot-blooded, my blood's up, and so on, are not poisonous. They become a source of nutrition or energy. So literally, when you, if you're not ignorant, the things that would otherwise make you antisocial and counterproductive to yourself and those around you become sources of energy and strength. So a Heruka is a deity or guru who embodies that. So, for example, Barway Dorje, his name includes Troktum Barway Dorje, blood drink or Heruka. Highest Heruka is one of 3 different deities within a group of 9 or 8. It's 8 plus the guru, who make up the major, not the only, but the major super mandala or Ubur mandala of the Nyingma tradition. And the highest Heruka, who's also called the perfect king, or manifest king, is here identified with Guru Rinpoche himself. So it says, so what is going to happen here is a deity will be mentioned, the realization that that deity embodies will be mentioned, and then the Guru, who historically is famous for having achieved that realization is mentioned. So, Lord of all Mandalas, highest Heruka, you realize the lucid mind's pure wisdom. So in other words, what that particular deity emphasizes or embodies in primary emphasis is the pure wisdom of the mind's lucidity. And I pray to Guru Lakeborn Vajra, Sochi Dorje, and so on. The next stanza begins a bodhisattva in your final life. This refers to an historical figure who lived probably in northwest India, or northwest part of the Indian subcontinent, let's say, in Uddiyana, and who's very hard to date. And he is largely regarded as the first human in the Dzogchen lineage because he received the Dzogchen teachings directly from the Buddha Vajrasattva. And although he undoubtedly received teachings from others as well, the best reconstruction of his Sanskrit name that has been found is in the Shabda Prasanga or Tantra, which some people say means penetrating sound Tantra, and some people say means the consequence of sound Tantra. I'm not going to take a position today. But anyway, it's the root Tantra of the 17 Tantras that make up the super secret cycle within the Upadesha class within the Dzogchen. And in it, he's referred to as Vajrahe or Prahe, Pravajrahe. Anyway, Prahe Vajra seems to be the origin of the Tibetan name Guru Rinpoche. I didn't know that. When I translated this, I thought it was Pramoda Vajra, but it's probably Prahe Vajra. That's what we're going with nowadays, by consensus. So pra means means most or best, supreme sometimes. He again is joy, and Vajra is Vajra. So Garap is the utmost joy, Vajra. And Barway Dorje or Prahe Vajra, here I said Pramoda Vajra Dara because I call him in the prayer Prahe Vajra Dara, embodies the magical illusion deities, specifically Vajrasattva. So he is inseparable from Vajrasattva. So in some mandalas of these, the group of gurus here who are called the 8 Vidyadharas, Guru Rinpoche and the 8 Vidyadharas, the 9th, Prahe Vajra, above Guru Rinpoche's head, is seen as inseparable from Vajrasattva. So as the first teacher of Dzogchen, he is inseparable from Vajrasattva, who was both his guru and his yidam. Then we turn to the east of the mandala. And among Herukas, we're going to go through the 5 Buddha families and then some, and then some. And the first one in the east, of course, is the Heruka Vajra family. So it says, from the expanse of mind arose Vajra Heruka, Guru and Yidam inseparable, great splendor. A great splendor, Palchen, great splendor refers to these, principally to these great wrathful deities, such as Yamantaka and Kila and this one, Vajraheruka. And they're called great splendor on a superficial level because they're so outrageous. They're really in your face. They're not like semi-wrathful deities where, there's like a sort of smile with a little bit of fangs showing. I mean, these ladies and gentlemen are they're serious. Ultimately speaking, great means supreme. They embody the great perfection that is the nature of all things. Splendor means that in their embodiment, they transcend both samsara and nirvana. They transcend nirvana because samsara because they are without ignorance. They transcend nirvana because they're certainly not passive. Another way of putting it is that they embody all the splendor of both samsara and nirvana. So if you were to take everything in general, but especially everything good in the world and beyond the world, and put it into one being, that would be great splendor. Any of them. There's a difference in emphasis, but not in essential nature. So Vajraheruka. And Vajraheruka is also a wrathful form of Vajrasattva. But don't get too caught up on that because so are several other deities in this list. So it's not that. You realize the meaning of the authentic one's 8 syllables. Okay. So, authentic one was what I chose that day to translate Yangdak. Now, Yangdak generally is a translation in Tibetan of the Sanskrit word samyak. So, for example, when we talk about the Eightfold Noble Path, pure samyak vritti and so on, the word is samyak, which gets translated as perfect, correct, authentic, and so on. The reason why Vajraheruka is called samyak or Yangdak in Tibetan is partly because the original text in the Tenjur on him, written by the Guru we're talking about here, Humkara, is called the only authentic accomplishment. And he's called authentic because he embodies the realization of Buddha nature and embodies Buddha nature itself. So he's called the authentic one because he's the one the deity referred to in the text called the authentic. It doesn't mean that only Yangdak is an authentic deity and these others are inauthentic. It doesn't mean that. And he's never called Samyak in Sanskrit except for the text. He's usually called either just Sri Heruka, splendid Heruka, or sometimes Vajraheruka, and so on. To give you an idea, in the new translation schools, his equivalent is Hevajra, because when they have 9 deity mandalas, it's the same introduction. Now, what is the meaning? Each of these deity systems can be summarized as an essential meaning. And the meaning of the authentic one's 8 syllables, the mantra of the Vajraheruka is the mantra of the wrathful deities from the peaceful and lawful deities. So, the Om, Rulu, Rulu, Hum, Jo, we would say, Om or Bio, Om. So it's 8 syllables. And now I'm going to quote from Guru Rinpoche's writings about that briefly. Now, this is not an explanation for those syllables. If it were, it would be beyond our purposes, particularly. What's important here is it goes to the 8 functions of mantra to begin with. So therefore can be applied to other deities. It's, for example, some prominent Buddhist teachers will apply the same rubric to the Kila mantra, and you can apply it to others. But in terms of how this relates to our practice as a community, our practice of the Vajrahiruka is principally the subtle essence of Vajrasattva, the peaceful and wrathful deities as a body mandala. And so you'll see, if you look at that among the wrathful deities, there are two principles. There's the kind of like the managing principle and the executive principle. And the managing principle is Vajrahiruka, and then the executive principle above him, sometimes above him, is the Supreme Hiruka. We'll get to later. So what are the 8 functions of mantra? Because this is important to know regardless of your practice. And this is basically understanding that any deity mantra you repeat, in this case the mantra of the wrathful deities, has 8 significances. The first is, again, quoting from Guru Rinpoche's commentary on Omkara's original sadhana, the mantra is the mandala. So every time you repeat the mantra of the yidam, you are in a sense making the sound of and here mandala means the architecture, the supporting mandala. So the palace, the realm, the elements, and so on. So the mantra contains and embodies the deity's mandala. Second is the mantra is the deity or deities. And this is very important to understand. In the stages of the path text that Lama Trata is teaching, at the very, very beginning, which was about, 10 years ago or something, he made this point, but no one could remember after that, because it's just at the beginning. But the mantra is the deity in the form of sound when heard or spoken, and in the form of writing when written or printed. So to use this mantra, the Rulu, as an example, in the case of the 58 wrathful deities, Om is the 5 Hirukas and their consorts, because Om embodies the 5 wisdoms. The first Rulu is the 8 Matrikas or Momos. Second Rulu is the 8 Simhas. They're called that because the first of them is a lion's head. I don't know. The 8 hybrid goddesses, anyway. Then the first Hum is the hold on, 10, 8, 16, that's 26, and 10 is 26. I'm missing some. It's 28. Okay, so then anyway, the Jo is the 28 Ishvaris minus the second, the Huma, the gatekeepers, the 4 gatekeeper goddesses, and then the Jo are the 28 Ishwaris, and the Hum, in the end, is the life essence of all of them. So in that way, the mantra, which is we think of as the mantra of all wrathful deities, embodies all 58 of these deities. When it's just the 9 deity mandala, each of the syllables represents one member of the entourage, and altogether represents the principle, and so on. So that's an example. And you can do this with any deity mantra, and the deities in that mandala. Third is a mantra should be understood to be recitable. In other words, obviously, it is something that you repeat. You repeat it again and again for the sake of habituation, deepening and strengthening of the positive habit. Next is activity. The mantras perform before activities: pacification, enrichment, attraction, and force. Next is offering. When you recite the mantra, that in itself is done as an offering to the deity. So you are offering the deity's sound to the deity, and by extension, you will typically emanate offerings from the light rays emitted by the mantra. Next is confession. Now, this is obviously true with the peaceful and wrathful deity practice, which is associated very much with purification. Both the 100-syllable mantra Vajrasattva and the 24-syllable mantra, which includes these 8 syllables. But it's also true with any other deity mantra, whether it's Om Mani Padme Hum, or Guru Rinpoche's mantra, or Tara's mantra, or Manjushri's mantra, or Kila's mantra. There is a quality of confession. But what is confession? Confession, literally, the Tibetan shakpa. Shakpa means to cleave apart, to break apart. Shakpa is what you do with an axe when you split a log. So it's got a quality of splitting. What are you splitting? You're splitting your consciousness from your nonsense. You're driving the mantra in between as a wedge or as an axe blade in between you and your garbage. The 7th is siddhi. All mantras embody siddhi. Every time you say a mantra, you gain a little bit of siddhi, a little bit of attainment. Especially, you can gain a lot under certain circumstances, and that's why when we receive siddhi at the end of a group practice, we do so reciting the mantra, because the mantra embodies siddhi. That's why so many mantras include, like the Vajrasattva mantra does, the Guru Rinpoche mantra does. So many mantras include the word siddhi, attainment, in it. But even if the mantra doesn't, the mantra embodies the siddhi or attainment of that deity. And then, finally, Jinya Shiva. The mantra is the true nature of all things. The mantra embodies the nature of all things. Well, of course, by definition, everything embodies its nature, right? So how could it not? The difference is that mantra is manifest embodiment. Mantra is an obvious or in-your-face embodiment of the nature of all things. So it's not the case that the fundamental nature of mantra and of non-mantric speech is that different, but mantra is communicates that fundamental nature in a way that our normal speech may not. When the nature of speech is realized, then all speech for that person functions as mantra. Okay, so what we learn from this cycle, which was propagated by the great master Hunkara. So it says, I pray to the Vidyadhara Maha Hunkara, one of Guru Rinpoche's 8 teachers, of whom not counting Brahmavajra or Sri Sangha, was mentioned later in a different prayer. What we learn from that is the relationship between deity and mantra, embodied in this case by the 8-syllable Rulu mantra. Okay, now we turn to the south. And the deity of the south is Manjushri Yamantaka. So now we're kind of on more familiar ground for many of you. And just as the authentic one is Vajrahiruka and is the mind of all Buddhas, Yamantaka is the Ratnahiruka, the Hiruka of the Ratna family, and is therefore the body, or is in this case, the body of all Buddhas. Now, typically, the Ratna family is qualities and the Buddha family is body, but here it's reversed. So from the expansive body arose the Ratnahiruka, Guru and Yidam inseparable, Yamantaka. You being Manjushri Mitra, who was among the 8 Vidyadharas, the one who was now Barway Dorje. So Barway Dorje is the reincarnation of this figure, Manjushri Mitra. And Manjushri Mitra was the heart son and inheritor of Prahibhadra, so the second human teacher in the Dzogchen lineage. You realize the meaning of the 3 wheels. The Yamantaka teachings in the Nyingma tradition are typically summarized as either the 4 or the 3 wheels. The 4-wheel summary or schema is more common. The 3-wheel summary, which is seemingly was more secret, and is found only in the terma, as far as I've heard, of Barway Dorje and Choktrul Lingpa, is the one that Lama Trotop explained when he taught the Yamantaka practice. So it means basically that all appearances, the simplest way to put it is that all appearances, sound, and thought are the body, speech, and mind of Yamantaka, whether you know it or not. That's just what they are. And those are called wheels because a wheel is a circle. Oh, there are other reasons why they're called wheels too, but a wheel is a circle. And a circle is both finite and infinite. So it's like your mind. You know, I am not part of your mind, but your experience of me it includes your experience of me, which is within your mind. So in each of our individual experience, our minds are infinite in that we can never get outside our mind. And yet, in a sense, each person, for the time being, relatively speaking, has their own mind. So in the same way, a circle doesn't come to an end, but it can in terms of how you can say this circle is here and this circle is here. So they're finite, but infinite. So that's one of the meanings of wheel here. There are lots of other. Wheel also has the notion of not just continuity, but transportation. It also has the notion of the kind of an eye of the storm thing. They call it the stationary wheel of dharmakaya, and the notion of cutting, like the chakram, the weapon in medieval India, which is still practiced, and still some Sikh soldiers wear them around. And it's actually how that what's that thing that was invented by an American inventor in the 70s? It's like a frisbee, but it's just it's a circle, and it's the perfect aerodynamic thing, and he based it consciously on the chakram. I forget it's got a name. Anyway, the guy is still alive too. He's very old. Anyway, so the Yamantaka symbol is the wheel, and the 3 wheels are the fact that everything you experience is Yamantaka's body, speech, and mind. And for the details of that, then I suggest you study Lama Trotop's commentary on the Yamantaka practice. So you realize the meaning of the 3 wheels. I pray to the feet of Manjushri Mitra. And so then the next one, heading to the west, is the Padmahiruka, who is the speech of all Buddhas, and that's Hayagriva. And this is very important because everybody is familiar not just with Hayagriva, but with Chenrezig practice. And Hayagriva and Chenrezig are the same thing, just one emphasizes the tranquility of compassion, where it's tranquil because there's no selfishness whatsoever. And one emphasizes the ungovernable, uncompromising activity of compassion, which is ungovernable and uncompromising because there's no selfishness. You can't manipulate someone who is completely compassionate. You can't appeal to their selfishness. You can't tell Chenrezig, don't, you'll get hurt. So, from the expansive speech arose Padmahiruka, Guru Yidam Indivisible Sri Hayagriva. Hayagriva means hoarse voice or hoarse sound, literally hoarse neck, but neck or throat in the sense of the sound. So the symbol of Hayagriva, visually the deity has a horse's head, neck on up, emerging from the top of his principal head, sometimes three, depending upon the form. And the symbol is neighing, the sound horses make, neighing. So it says, you realize the meaning of the three neighs. And this is in a general way, the easiest to explain following Karma Chame, and in a specific way, the most arcane of these. So I looked it up this morning for the arcane one. I'm not quite sure if you're going to want that one or not. The basic idea, according to Karma Chame, of Hayagriva as the wrathful form of Chenrezig is speed, efficiency. The fastest spiritual path is compassion. Since the nature of the spiritual path is the eradication of selfishness, the fastest spiritual path is that of compassion. So therefore, the wrathful or forceful or fierce form of Chenrezig has a horse's head because the horse was the fastest thing you could ride. It was like a vehicle. And correspondingly, Vajrayogini will often be shown as having a sow's head emerging from the top of her head, or sometimes some other part of her head, because the purest form of realization is transcendence of all ideas about reality. So there's nothing faster in terms of means of the path. There is no greater means. There's nothing more powerful as a spiritual fuel than compassion. And in terms of the knowledge of reality, there is nothing more profound than the eradication of all ideas about ultimate reality. And so often we'll see these two deities together, like in the Ngondro practice. At the end of the Ngondro, you imagine yourself as Hayagriva in union with Vajravarahi. And that's why, because they embody the fastest, most direct, fastest in his case, most direct in her case, spirituality and spiritual wisdom imaginable. So, yeah. Now the three nays. I mean, it's brief, so, and you deal with it as you will. The simple answer is just the Trikaya, the three bodies. The first nay is Hayagriva or Chenrezi's announcement, you could say, or proclamation of the Dharmakaya, the second of the Sambhogakaya, and the third of the Nirmanakaya. That's the sort of the public answer. But I'll give you what Jamul Rutai says about this. All practices of lotus speech, that is to say of Hayagriva, are included in the three nays. Why? Because self-arisen wisdom is included in them or in that. And then he comments on what he wrote, saying, this means that the primordial self-arisen wisdom, that is the nature of, we could say the nature of the mind, is, I'll translate it literally, is proud to be Sri Hayagriva. Now, proud to be sounds funny in English. It's almost like the exultant. I mean, you have to think of, and we'll need to we'll have to consult Kathy for the language here, but don't horses have these gestures they do when it just feels good to be a horse? It's that kind of thing. It's like exulting in their own horseness. And you think of the mane and the way that when they do that, and they're in a happy way, not a distressed way. That's an image for the natural display through compassion of self-arisen wisdom. And what follows that is the communication, which is the name. So again, self-arisen primordial wisdom, proud to be, or exultant, let's say, in being Sri Hayagriva, nays 3 times. The first nay communicates the realization that all things of samsara and nirvana were never created. So we would say in English, nothing of samsara and nirvana was ever created, but is spontaneously present. So again, you can think of that in a general way as the idea of menam, non-existent appearances. The second nay reduces all of that, the container or the environment and contents, to an ocean of flesh, blood, and bone, and serves it to all the momos, the matriarchs and dakinis, who enjoy it with delight. Now, you may be wondering, well, wait a second, how did we get there? We were talking about the nature of reality, and now we've got transforming everything into something grisly and then giving it to all these scary ladies. What's going on? The first nay is the proclamation or the announcement of emptiness, let's say, to use the general term. Let's reduce it to general Buddhist language. But if you realize emptiness, or let's say selflessness is even better, selflessness, then what happens? Because don't forget, Hayagriva is the exultant energy of self-arisen wisdom. What are the characteristics of selfishness? Rigidity, stupidity, and passion in the sense of I want my way. Those 3 things. Rigidity is here represented as bone. Stupidity as flesh, and selfish passion as blood. But we saw earlier in the context of Herukas in general that blood can be consumed. If you eradicate ignorance, all that emotional energy can become nutrition. Theory. I'm just telling you this, what they say. I'm not saying, I do not claim to have achieved this. So what would Chenrezig do? He would feed his own rigidity, his own stupidity, and his own passions to the world. So he transforms everything into a feast for matriarchs or momos and dakinis. That's the second. And now we come to the third. Sumbe, through the third neigh, so now he neighs third time, all of them are enlisted. In other words, they all now want to help Chenrezig liberate all beings. Tamji kanyen sundut jopte chicho, and will do whatever he asks of them. So you could say realization, transformation, and enlistment those are the three neighs. So therefore, Hayagriva is often simply called Wangchen, great power. And the power here, as we saw this morning with Guru Rinpoche, is the power of compassion. Nothing's more powerful than compassion, and nothing is weaker or more powerless, ultimately. May not seem like it at times, but ultimately, nothing is weaker than selfishness. And that's what Hayagriva is all about. So you can think of selflessness in the three neighs as having the two meanings that it has in English: the non-existence of the imputed self of persons, and being free from any kind of selfishness. Okay, now let's move on. So that's Hayagriva. In terms of our Hayagriva practices, there is one major form of Hayagriva in the Dharma of Barway Dorje, so there are 6. You know how it works, folks. Yes, and I did do that knowing that I'd get a giggle out of a couple of you. Couldn't resist it. First of all, in the Ngondro, after the Guru Yoga, there's a Hayagriva deity yoga. That's the first one. Okay, we won't go through the volumes. Then second is there's a version, there's a form of Hayagriva that's Yamantaka, so it can be called Yamantaka Hayagriva, who is the speech of Yamantaka, practiced as those of you who attend that know, as part of the Yamantaka Mandala, and also can be practiced separately. Third is of the 4 longevity sadhanas, of which there are 6, of course. One is the longevity sadhana of Hayagriva, who, because he's Chenrezig, and Chenrezig is also Amitayas, therefore, of course, he has his own longevity sadhana. Why not? So that's 3. And then there's the main one, the main Hayagriva sadhana of the Barway Dorje Dharma, which I think that maybe Lama Yuma's specialty, but you didn't hear it here. I think so, I don't know, which is called Hayagriva Kila. That's Hayagriva as Kila or Kila as Hayagriva, depending upon how you want to look at it. And but that also has 2 other forms of Hayagriva along with it. So there's a total of 6 main ones, and then various minor ones. So that's our connection to Hayagriva. And now we come, and the teacher from whom Guru Rinpoche received the Hayagriva teachings was Nagarjuna. Now, some people say this was the Nagarjuna, and some people say it wasn't the Nagarjuna, it was somebody else called Nagarjuna. because names do get used many times and I do not take a position. Now we turn to the north, and if Hayagriva is the Heruka of the Padma family and the speech of all Buddhas, and now we're going to the Karma Heruka, the Heruka of the Karma family, who is the activity of all Buddhas. And again, this is Kila. So he's called Guru in Yidam, indivisible Maha Vajra Kumara. The deity that we call Vajrakila or Vajrakilaya is also, and somewhat more often, called Vajrakumara. Kumara means youth of a noble family. So you could say prince or scion, and there are a lot of reasons for that in the cycle. The ultimate meaning is that he's the unchanging youthful body of the dharmakaya. And then there are reasons in legend because of the way he overcomes. Each of these deities has their own overcoming Rudra story. Rudra's had a very hard time with our bunch. As Mara, after afflicting the Buddha and not doing well, exclaimed when Manjushri was doing something to him. He said to Manjushri, he said, "You are worse than me." He said, "You do to me what I try to do to sentient beings." So Mara, Rudra, they have a hard time with our bunch. And so Kila or Vajrakumara also overcame Rudra. And the way he did it was that Vajra Heruka, who we saw a few minutes ago, took the form of Rudra, impregnated Mrs. Rudra in the myth. It's like King Arthur, actually. And then the baby was Kila. That's why he's called the son or the Vajra youth and so on. And then he took care of the Rudra in that version. The most common version is the Hayagriva version, where Hayagriva overcomes Rudra. So you realized the meaning of the four Kilas, and I prayed at the feet of Prabhahasti. Prabhahasti was among Guru Rinpoche's teachers, the teacher from whom he received Kila, Vajrakumara, and other teachings. Some accounts have him also being Guru Rinpoche's preceptor, from whom he received the monastic vows. The four Kilas, in the Kila context, it's a division into four aspects of the practice. The material Kila is the implement used in ritual, which can be empowered and used to both symbolically through the blessing of the deity, eradicate one's kleshas and ignorance, and also to attempt to rectify such things as epidemics and other natural disasters and environmental problems. So the material Kila is typically connected with what we would call magic. But the reason it works is because it represents one of the later Kilas that we'll get to in a second. Then we have the Kila of appearances, the Kila of existence. And that is the deities, specifically the transformation of the world into the mandala of Kila. So, for example, the set of empowerments that Lama Yeshe gave a few weeks ago were called the Great Life Kila of Existence and Tranquility. It's the transformation of all of samsara and nirvana into the mandala of Kila. Then the third one has a couple of names. Sometimes it's called the Kila of Bodhicitta, in which case it can refer either to the compassion or to great bliss or to both. And sometimes it's called the Kila of Mahasukha or great bliss. And that refers to the let's just say the realization of great bliss through the practice of Kila. And then the fourth is the kila of awareness, which is the meaning, the ultimate meaning of the other three, and is the the general explanation of this is best here. It's the eradication of the dualism between the awareness that looks at the nature of mind and the nature of mind that is looked at. So it's piercing or penetrating that membrane of delusion. So it's the mind's awareness reaching or piercing the mind's nature, the expanse. So it's called the piercing of the expanse or penetration of the expanse by the kila of awareness. So those are the four kilas in a very general public, this is all public explanation. Then we have the highest Heruka, who I said is also called perfect king. And this is the deity who presides over the mandala that's called the incitement of momos or mantrakas. And this is very much part of several cycles in the Barway Dorje tradition. There is also a separate practice of Manifest King that's contained in the daily chant book and also in the writings of Barway Dorje. But principally the emphasis in we would say in American Buddhism, relating to the Mamo principle, as you like to say it. You relate to the Mamo principle through the practice of Yamantaka and the associated protectress. And I don't want to go further with that in public. But it's a great play, highest Heruka Guru and Yidam, indivisible, perfect king. You realize the meaning of the expanse and wisdom. The particular meaning of the incitement of the momos is sometimes explained as channels, energy, and essence. Here it's explained as the unity of expanse and wisdom. It's similar to the idea that with the kila of awareness. I don't think we should go much further with that right now. And the teacher from whom Guru Rinpoche received that was called Dhammasamskrita. Next, we come to Buddha Heruka, the last of the Herukas of the five families. And here is the qualities of the Guru. Supreme great splendor, that means the supreme Heruka. So in the context of our, the cycles we practice, the cycle particularly associated with this is called the peaceful and wrathful deities of the spacious expanse. It's a longer form of the peaceful and wrathful deities that is often used for the accomplishment of Amrita. And but by extension, it's also somewhat present in subtle essence Vajrasattva as well. So we see the supreme Heruka as I said earlier, the executive principle of the mandala of wrathful deities. You realize the meaning of primordially liberated original purity. That refers to the realization of Dzogchen, the primordial freedom. The freedom is not to be achieved, but is to be recognized as already present, and primordial purity, which is the nature of that which is primordially free. And it's put that way here because the teacher who received these teachings originally, and from whom Guru Rinpoche received them, is Vimalamitra, who was, like Guru Rinpoche, one of the most famous masters, Indian masters of the Dzogchen teachings. Generally speaking, when this cycle of Amrita qualities, or the supreme Heruka, is reduced to a pithy essence, like the three nays, the four wheels, the four kilas, and so on, it's called the all-pervasive purity of Amrita. And that's very easy to explain in theory, which is simply that the nature, ultimately there's no difference between cognition and matter. But if we entertain our delusion, there appears to be matter and cognition, two aspects, right? The nature of all cognition is primordially pure awareness, and the nature of all matter is amrita. Everything that is material, everything that is composed of particles, however we experience it, is in fact one of the five amritas. The amrita, which means the elixir of deathlessness of the five Buddha families. Then next we have play of wind and mantra, fierce Heruka, power of the Guru Vajrapani. There are two remaining forms in this mandala of 8 deities plus the Guru, and they're both forms of Vajrapani. One is called, offerings and praise to the mundane, because it's Vajrapani as he enlists and enlists mundane spirits in virtue. And the other one is called Nupadrama, which means Dranga, let's just say powerful, forceful mantra. And these are both forms of Vajrapani. In our system, the practice of Jikten Chutu, or enlistment, offerings and praise to worldly spirits, which doesn't mean that it's a practice of a worldly being. It doesn't mean that. It's a confusing name for most people. Is actually Trolu, when we talked about this morning. The Barway Dorje Trolu sadhana is Dorje Trolu, Wrathful Guru Rinpoche, inseparable from Vajrapani as the anyway, if you knew, it wouldn't make any difference. It wouldn't make any sense to you if I explained the details, because you don't have references for them. But basically, it incorporates the deities of the Jikten Chutu, or the offerings and praises to the mundane. And the other one is the Nupadrama, the forceful mantra cycle, is a form of Vajrapani that's called the peaceful and wrathful Loktripala. So that is, again, a separate cycle and a separate volume within the termas of Barway Dorje. So it just says, play of wind and mantra, fierce Heruka, power of the Guru Vajrapani. You realize the forceful mantras that steal the lives of the haughty. Steal the lives of the haughty does not mean killing haughty spirits. To steal the life means to captivate, to bewitch, And I mean, you could, I prayed to Rambuguya Chandra, that was a teacher of both Guru Rinpoche and Nupchen Sanji Yeshe. And then Heruka, who tames Maras on the haughty, black powerful one, great king of the wrathful and actor of activity, and so on. That is the other one that I mentioned, the powerful black one, and Guru Rinpoche received that from Shanti Garba, which means essence of peace, who was the last of his 8 teachers. So the prayer continues with a summary saying, I pray to the Mahaguru who personifies the bodies, speech, minds, qualities, activity of liberating beings, wisdom, kindness, and power, all the 100,000 gates of skill, of all the Buddhas of the 3 times, and so on. And then, the rest is pretty easy to understand. The last stanza is basically saying that when you recite this prayer, you're doing so with the idea that all the deities, the various deities, embody different attributes or qualities of the Guru. and that's the Guru and deities inseparable. Okay, most of you are falling asleep, so we'll stop there and we'll have Q&A now if you want to ask any questions.
I have a question. Would you like the air conditioner to be back on?
Please, because everyone's going to sleep.
Yeah. I'll do it.
Is it hard to hear with the AC on in the back? Or is it
Yes, I think it's really cold.
cold?
I'm gonna turn it down, so
Oh,
that's
okay.
not as cold for these people back
Yeah.
here.
Or we should
It was
trade
set up
places,
like
because
that.
I'm always hotter than other people. I should go where it's cold, and then you all should sit up here. You could form a stack like the deity lineage tree. One of you can sit on this, and then human pyramid for those who don't want to be
And
cold.
celibate.
I guess. Yeah. Okay, so questions?
I have one.
Yes.
Well, that way we can hear you with the AC on.
Okay.
I realize I'm one of the ones that was kind of getting sleepy back here, but I can't find the mantra.
Which mantra?
The one you were talking about, the 8 significant.
Well, it just says it doesn't give the mantra. It just
Oh,
mentions the. No, it doesn't.
Okay,
It just
so
says
I'm not-
the authentic one's 8 syllables, but it doesn't give them.
Gotcha.
The mantra is found in the Subtle Essence Vajrasattva. It's the mantra it's the second half of that peaceful and wrathful deity mantra, Om Ahum. Bodhicitta Janadhatu Ah is the peaceful deities, and then Om Rulu Rulu Hum
Oh,
Jo
yeah,
Hum,
yeah.
that's the wrathful
That's actually
deities.
the one I had in my brain. So.
Yeah, that's the one.
But I couldn't find it here, so I thought it would be.
No, you don't. No,
Okay.
you didn't miss it. It wasn't there.
Not good.
Okay, thank you for this teaching. It's been very elucidating. You said you weren't going to talk about it because Lama Yeshe taught about it in the last session of the Songs of Barway Dorje, the Guru Yoga aspect.
Well, the Guru Yoga is used. I mean, the original text, it doesn't say to do that Guru Yoga. It implies that you would use each of these with the individual sadhanas for that mandala. And also the main practice of this would be in the mundra. I mean, strictly speaking, you're supposed to chant all of these when you're doing mundra in retreat. If you're doing the Guru Yoga, the Guru Rinpoche mundra, you would be doing one of these at the end of each of the 4 sessions. And then the 5th one is done as the main thing. You repeat that again and again and again. But the fact is that in this country, people can't chant that much. We can't, because you're not chanting in your native language. So, and if you chant it in English, it's much longer because English is not monosyllabic. So it needs to be just sort of done on special occasions. And so we use it before the Dzogchen practice, when during the Dzogchen retreat. And then it's paired with a Guru Yoga that was written by Barway Dorje as a Mahamudra Guru Yoga and then tweaked by Karma Tupten so that it would fit with this. But Lama taught it,
Right, he did. And my question is specific in the dissolution part where before father and mother Harukas.
Yeah, I don't want to, there are many, many things that we talk about here that you won't get talked about at any other Dhamma center. And it's the responsibility of each teacher, whoever's teaching, to decide how far they're willing to go with the people there and the context. And Lama Chotop, of course, has much more experience and realization than I do, so he can go much farther. I'm not comfortable talking about the path of means, see, that Guru Yoga was originally written for somebody who was clearly a path of means practitioner, and therefore who needed a Guru Yoga dissolution that included the uncommon path of means. But such teachings, if I may say so, should not be treated casually. It's very nice that people can read this. It's very nice that Rinpoche gave his permission for me to translate that book and that you can read it. It's nice of Lama Chato to explain it. But frankly, it may not be something that we need to dwell on right now.
Thank you. But can't really read mine from typing, but when you're talking about Trollo, Trollo, and you said Trollo.
Don't say Trollo. Trollo doesn't sound good at all.
Trollo.
And if you know, like Eastern Tibetans, you know, especially because they get really into this deity because, you know, we love Trollo so much. It's just such a, I mean, how can you not? I mean, it's like the ultimate.
Prankster?
No, he's beyond that. He's like, it's like, well, we're all here because we have a connection with Barway Dorje, one way or another. So we all have a connection with a guru who is a bit of a rabble rouser, trouble. Well, Trollo is the god of trouble. So beyond prankster.
And how would you spell that?
Trollo?
Yeah.
The best way to spell it is T-R-O. Some people spell it D-R-O. It's in between the two. And then L-O umlaut. And there's an English word for umlaut, but nobody knows it, so let's just say umlaut. That's it. Trollo. As in Goethe, almost like Goethe. And then you know, it's. I mean, there's just nothing. I mean, all Guru Yoga is the same, and all forms of Guru Rinpoche are equally profound and have blessing. But there's something about Trollo that just somehow is. Well, anyway. Sorry, you were asking about Trollo.
You said something like we shouldn't try to control the venue or the media, and I made an association, but it may be wrong. So please correct me if there's no association.
Okay.
It brought to mind the idea that all appearances are my guru. And how I struggle with that. Do those have
Yes,
any
that's
relationship?
exactly the point.
Oh.
Yeah, we shouldn't make the distinctions. Dzogchen is very funny. One of the four unique features of Dzogchen, you know, the politically correct way is to say Dzogchen and everything else is the same and so on. But the truth is Dzogchen is unique. In Buddha Shakyamuni's teaching, Dzogchen is unique. And if somebody doesn't like that I'm saying that, then fine. I have lots of people don't like me already, so it's nothing new. But one of the four features that have been defined by all Dzogchen masters, including Jangma Tai, Mepam, all of them, is precise and fine distinctions that are not made elsewhere. Only in Dzogchen is the finest distinction between the all-basis consciousness and the dharmakaya made, for example, and all the other distinctions that follow upon that. So that's the first of four. So we have to therefore make very fine distinctions, but we have to beware of false distinctions at the same time. And that's what's so tricky. And so the part of the emphasis, and if you ever learn practice, a great deal of it is concerned with or emphasizes the guru being everywhere. It's not unique to that cycle or that type of cycle, but it's always somehow emphasized.
can I have a follow-up question?
Yes.
And you went into this a little bit, but I didn't catch it all. About it seems to me if that is something that is to be kept in mind, that it requires a kind of courage that is. So you mentioned concepts that Barway Rinpoche had talked about, fearlessness in the refuge vow.
Well, he was talking about, he defined Buddha in that context traditionally as what makes the Buddha a fit refuge as a teacher. Why do we take Buddha as we take refuge in the Buddha as a teacher, in the sense of the founder of a tradition, the person who taught something that nobody else had taught in human history. What makes him special was a fourfold fearlessness. Fearlessness in asserting that he had realized all that was to be realized. In other words, the Buddha could say, there is nothing that I have not realized, and be speaking the truth. Fearlessness in asserting that he had abandoned or relinquished everything that there is to be relinquished. The Buddha alone could say, I have I have gotten rid of every possible defect and problem, intrinsic. And then Rinpoche would say, and for the benefit of others, fearless in proclaiming the path, as the nature of the path, as well as the obstacles encountered on the path. So the Buddha was fearless in describing the path, as well as what you cross over or deal with on the path, because he had completed the path.
There's a couple of questions online.
Sure.
Just read that. Marina, I have a general question about the position of Guru Rinpoche's right hand holding the Vajra high to the heart or low by the hip.
Mm-hmm.
What do those positions mean?
When Guru Rinpoche is shown holding the Vajra at his heart, but not to his heart, like Vajrasattva, but facing outward, if you were looking at him facing the viewer, that's called the mudra of fearlessness. And he is saying, don't be afraid because your nature is indestructible. The Vajra represents indestructibility of what's called Vajra nature, or in general Buddhism, Buddha nature. So he's saying, this is fearlessness. In most cases, like Amoga Siddhi is shown with the same gesture, with just his empty hand. Guru Rinpoche does it with a Vajra because he's saying there's no need for fear because your nature is indestructible. And in the case of our form of the Guru Rinpoche who overcomes all that appears and exists, holding it up in the sky, as he is also in certain other cycles, it represents the fearlessness that comes from the realization that that nature is the nature of everything, is all pervasive. And also the idea of the highest view, or the view of the sky represents the unlimited space of the mind. In other cycles, when the Vajra is held downward, it represents more his ability to command you could say, to dispel negativity downward. Would be better.
Do you have time for another one?
Sure, plenty.
Dorje Lama, I'm fascinated by the idea of Dorje Cholo, bringing the Dharma into new lands by being confusing and unpredictable. Do you know of any examples of this kind of activity?
Of course.
In our time?
Yeah, of course. Yes, I do. But I'm not going to say them because people, there's all sorts of, the only teachers I will talk about here are the teachers from here. So I would say there is an aspect of that in Barway Rinpoche's activity, the activity of the Jamgon Karmapa, the activity of Sutta Rinpoche. There are other teachers who have very much embodied that. The one example that I would use, maybe a little bit Chintse Rinpoche, it's also Chintse Rinpoche. And there are some famous examples, but you know, people now are times get worse and worse. And as soon as a teacher dies, people start bad-mouthing them and saying they were bad, and so I'm not going to get into that.
Okay, so the context why she asked the question is she just said, I'm fascinated in part because I see a parallel between the activity and the kind of culture change I'm trying to spark in environmental work.
Well, bless her heart. Lou Merritt is, who asked the question, is an environmental activist, very much concerned with, so that this not just be in the middle of nowhere, with the preservation of water in the state of Florida, where if anyone has been there, as anyone who's been there knows, is a huge, huge issue. And so for her, spirituality is inseparable from preservation and good stewardship of the environment. I don't know of any specific correlation between that particular form of Guru Rinpoche and environmental stewardship or preservation, including water. But certainly there are lots of cases of sort of the discovery of springs and so on by Chögyens who have been blessed by Guru Rinpoche. So that might be a connection, because Trollut is also associated with the concealment of the Terma treasures.
That's it for online, so.
Okay. It was very, very good pie, by the way.
I'm going down.
So glad you enjoyed it. It was the intention. Yeah, I just want to thank you so much. You know, I was very curious about Hayagriva. I took refuge with Hayagriva and Bartuku Rinpoche. And of course, in almost every single one of our explorations, I don't know what else to call them, he is definitely mentioned. And in fact, I was going to ask Lama T to possibly even give a teaching on Hayagriva. But I would just want to thank you because you answered my question. The Hayagriva is Shenrezi.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that, so thank you so much.
Well, that's why I'm doing this, because you know, people are given these prayers to chant. When you do the Dzogchen program, then you chant this every day during the 10 days, and many people continue to chant it on their own. But there's not that much explanation, simply because there isn't time to go through it. And so that's why it's necessary to because otherwise, I mean, you have no idea who these deities are. Why should you pray to deities you have no sense of connection with? But once you hear that Hayagriva is Chenrezi, then the whole thing starts to make more sense. You're welcome. Yeah.
My brother is actually here, but he's in the main shrine room as far as I know, lying on his back because he has a bad back.
Oh.
He would be asking this question. I thought I'd ask it for him. I hope I get it right. But basically, in terms of, he said he understood that Buddhists do not get angry, cannot have anger. But he's
Buddhas. Oh, I thought you said Buddhists. Oh, okay, Buddhas. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah.
But he still was somewhat mystified by, I guess, some of the texts.
Of course, yes.
Practices that he's read, speaking of great violence.
Sure. Well, we use the metaphor or analogy of heroism and violence, like violent conflict in defense of the innocent and so on, as an image to communicate the affect of being willing to take on and defeat our own crap. Because it is a battle. I mean, it's not easy to actually, you know, and there's quite a bit of talk of tyranny for one reason or another, without getting into specific reasons. We're saying that there are specific reasons why we might want to be talking about tyranny and the possibility of tyranny. But there's quite a bit of talk about tyranny. And the thing about tyranny, and those who should know better but back tyranny because they're scared or they don't want to lose their jobs, it takes courage to combat tyranny. And so the tyranny that we can't, I mean, our meditation practice and even our ceremonies cannot manipulate the external world. If that were the purpose of doing so, then we're really bad at it. You know, people sometimes accuse us of practicing what's, you know, like magic. Well, if we're practicing magic, we're not very good. We're really not very good. You know, so I hope that's not what we're doing, because if that's what we're doing, we really suck. So what are we doing? What are we stabbing with the kilo? What are these deities waving their swords at and going like this about? And you know, it's our own selfishness. The tyranny that we can fight, the only tyranny that we can, in the end. I mean, we have to take social responsibility, but that's not the role of a religion. When religions start to tell people about then we have another problem. The role of a Buddhist religion is to teach us how not to be a nuisance to others. Step one. Then if we get to the point where, and that's the first third of Buddhism, right? Don't be a nuisance to others. Ahimsa. I'm still working on that personally. And sometimes I have good days and bad days. But anyway, once we get that, where we're usually not a nuisance to others, then we can start to think about actually helping others. But before we can help others, and before we can really not be a nuisance to others, we have to resist the tyranny of our own selfishness. And that takes courage, because it's so easy to be selfish because we're habituated. It's not that we are selfish by nature. That is not our true nature. We're selfish by habit, but long-standing habit. And that is what, you know, the ferocity of these fierce or wrathful deities is the courage, the ferocious courage that it takes to be unselfish when it's so, when we have to swim against the current of habit. And if we don't resist selfishness within ourselves, all of our attempts to help others will simply add to the problem. And this is what goes wrong with revolutions. They start out as people who want to help others, but then because they haven't conquered selfishness, they become worse than what they're rebelling against. It's happened again and again and again and again and again, and it's going to keep on happening. as long as we act out of selfishness. And this is also why any changes in the tradition have to happen gradually and organically. Siddha Rinpoche talked about this many years ago, and the way he talked about it I thought was beautiful and pithy and profound. He said that Buddhism changes as it goes from one place to another, one culture to another. I mean, the Japanese Zen priests wear a Dharma robe that's very, very different from what they wear in Sri Lanka, but it represents the same thing. The difference, he said, is between revolution and evolution. Revolution always reflects the agenda of a few people. It's never really about the rights of everyone. It's always about the rights of the people who are angry because they want to, they want to be on top. They don't want somebody else to be on top. They don't want to get rid of the pyramid. They want to be on top of the pyramid. Let's be honest. Evolution reflects the needs of the environment. That's very different. And this is the problem with when people in my position, Western so-called Dharma teachers, start making big changes. I could make huge changes. I know all kinds of changes I could come up with, but it would be harmful because it would be my idea of what's best for people, and I don't know. Might be best for a few people. It probably wouldn't be best for most people. It would be nice if things could change all of a sudden, if we could get rid of all corruption in the world and all corruption in spiritual traditions, but we can't, because the attempt to do so in a violent way is going to be selfish. So the ferocity of the wrathful deities is not the ferocity of fighting external enemies, but having the daring and courage not to give in to the tyranny of our own, we say ego, but really selfishness. When we talk about Buddhism in highly theoretical terms, we use things like false imputation of belief in the self and blah, 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 blah. It doesn't really hurt. This should hurt. If it doesn't hurt, it's not doing anything. But when I say, I can ask myself, to what extent do I cognitively believe in false imputation, blah, 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 and I just go to sleep. Am I selfish? Yes, I am selfish. I am a selfish person. That's the question we must ask ourselves. Not, have I understood the middle way view, or am I still an adherent of mind only, or that's just, the views are not horseshit by any means. The views are great. But when we talk about that as though we've realized these things, it's not even horseshit, it's horse diarrhea. We should be talking about, am I selfish or not? And that's the role of the wrathful deities. Because you can convince yourself, as one great Buddhist master said, you can convince yourself while meditating on Chenrezig that you might be willing to have a cup of tea with you and talk about philosophy. But try that shit with Humantica? No. So it's having the courage to get real with the real issue, which is selfishness. That's why in the Kadampa tradition, they say the forceful mantras of the Kadampa tradition are all things like, confronting your own selfishness. That's the real, wrathful magic or whatever, is the destruction of your own, our own fixation. Well, we're done. So we'll chant all the dedication prayers starting on page 7 of this. I know it's confusing because I use different page numbers and then people don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm talking about this here. Sunam di tamje zikba nye tomne nyebe rana pamje chega na chik ala chubai. Side zole rowa sho. Gewa di chewo suna yeshe zozo suna yeshe le zhong namba kunye rowa sho. Zhongzhu semne rinpoche mache pana cheje cheba nyamba meba gondo kawa sho. Senjen damje leda denjoje nendo damje taku tompare Zhongzhu semba anda sa shubha teta kunje man roba lo Thank you, everybody. See you in the morning. And don't forget, pie is there. If you haven't had pie, you should have pie. And if you have had pie, you might want to think about having more pie.